The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport as Maya checked her phone for the third time. Flight 447 to Chicago was boarding in 20 minutes, and she wanted to make sure she had everything ready. Her black leather briefcase sat beside her, packed with presentations and reports that needed her attention during the 2-hour flight. Maya had been looking forward to this trip for weeks, not because of the business meetings waiting for her in Chicago, but because of the small luxury she had planned for herself. 3 weeks ago, when booking this flight, she had specifically chosen seat 14A, the window seat. She rarely splurged on extras, but this time felt different. Work had been overwhelming lately, and the thought of watching the clouds drift by while she worked seemed like exactly what she needed. She had even packed her favorite tea bags and downloaded a new playlist. Sometimes it was the little things that made business travel bearable. Maya smiled to herself as she gathered her belongings. The gate attendant had just called for boarding, and as someone who always arrived early, she would be among the first to settle in. Walking down the jet bridge, Maya felt that familiar mix of excitement and nervousness that came with flying. She loved the window seat not just for the view, but for the sense of control it gave her. No one climbing over her to use the bathroom, no strangers bumping her arm while they slept. Just her work, and the peaceful view outside. The flight attendant at the door greeted her with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, welcome aboard," he said, glancing at her boarding pass. His name tag read James, and something about his genuine friendliness made Maya feel immediately at ease. She had noticed over the years how much a crew's energy could affect the entire flight experience. "Thank you," Maya replied, making her way down the narrow aisle. The plane was still mostly empty, giving her plenty of room to navigate to row 14. She found her seat easily and placed her briefcase in the overhead compartment, keeping only her laptop bag and water bottle with her. Settling into 14A, Maya took a deep breath and looked out the small oval window. The ground crew was busy loading luggage, and she watched their choreographed movements with interest. There was something calming about the organized chaos of an airport. Everyone had somewhere to be, something important waiting for them. She pulled out her laptop and opened the presentation she needed to review. Her company was pitching a major client tomorrow, and as the lead marketing strategist, Maya knew every detail had to be perfect. The quiet hum of the plane's systems and the gradual filling of seats around her created the perfect background for focused work. Maya had always been the type of person who planned ahead. She researched restaurants before traveling, read reviews of hotels, and yes, she carefully selected her seat assignments. The window seat on this particular flight had cost an extra $15, but she considered it money well spent. She had learned long ago that small investments in her own comfort and peace of mind were worth every penny. As more passengers boarded, Maya glanced up occasionally from her screen. Families juggled carry-on bags and sleepy children. Business travelers like herself moved efficiently down the aisle, already mentally preparing for their destinations. An elderly couple helped each other with their overhead luggage, and Maya smiled at their gentle teamwork. The seats next to her, 14B and 14C, remained empty as the boarding process continued. Maya allowed herself to hope they might stay that way. An empty middle seat would make the flight even more comfortable, giving her extra space to spread out her materials. She had presentations to review, emails to answer, and a proposal to finalize before landing in Chicago. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Lisa. "Safe travels. Don't work too hard on the plane," Maya typed back quickly. "You know me too well. But I promised to look out the window at least once." She added a laughing emoji and put her phone in airplane mode. The flight was now about 3/4 full, and Maya could see that boarding was nearing its end. She had positioned her laptop at the perfect angle and found a comfortable way to rest her feet. The armrest was hers, and she had easy access to her water bottle. Everything was exactly as she had hoped. James, the friendly flight attendant from earlier, was now helping passengers in her section. She noticed how patient he was with everyone, from the nervous first-time flyers to the demanding frequent travelers who acted like they owned the plane. There was something professional yet genuinely caring about the way he handled each interaction. Maya turned back to her work, highlighting key points in her presentation and making small notes in the margins. The client meeting tomorrow was important, potentially the biggest account her company had ever landed. She wanted to be absolutely prepared, and the quiet focus time during the flight was essential to her preparation. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard and announcing that they would begin preparing for departure shortly. Maya looked out the window again, watching as the last of the ground crew finished their work. The sun was starting to set, promising a beautiful view once they were airborne. She had made this flight dozens of times for work, but she never got tired of the moment when the plane lifted off the ground. There was something magical about rising above the city, watching the buildings shrink below and the landscape spread out like a map. It always reminded her of how big the world was and how many possibilities existed beyond her daily routine. Maya checked her seatbelt and put her laptop in the seat back pocket in front of her. Preparing for takeoff, the flight attendants were making their final checks, and she could feel the subtle shift in energy that meant departure was imminent. She had her window seat, her work was organized, and she was ready for a productive and peaceful flight to Chicago. What she didn't know was that her carefully planned journey was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would test not just her patience, but her resolve to stand up for herself in a situation she never could have anticipated. Just as Maya was settling into the peaceful quiet of her window seat, she heard hurried footsteps in the aisle. The final boarding call had been announced minutes ago, and these were clearly the last passengers rushing to make the flight. She glanced up from her laptop screen to see a woman and a young boy hurrying down the aisle, both looking slightly frazzled from their last-minute dash through the airport. The woman appeared to be in her mid-40s, with shoulder-length blonde hair and a designer handbag clutched tightly in her hand. Her son looked to be around 8 or 9 years old, dragging a small rolling suitcase behind him that kept bumping into other passengers' legs. They were both breathing heavily, and Maya could hear the woman muttering something about traffic and slow security lines. As they approached row 14, Maya realized with a sinking feeling that these must be the passengers assigned to the seats next to her. So much for her hope of having extra space for the flight. She watched as the woman checked her boarding pass against the row numbers, and sure enough, they stopped right at Maya's row. "Excuse me," the woman said, slightly out of breath. "I think we're sitting next to you." She gestured to seats 14B and 14C, the middle and aisle seats that Maya had been hoping would remain empty. "Of course," Maya replied politely, standing up slightly to let them pass. The airplane aisle was narrow, and it was always an awkward dance when passengers needed to get to their seats. But instead of moving past her, the woman stopped and really looked at Maya's seat for the first time. Her eyes went from Maya to the window, then back to Maya again. There was a pause, and Maya could almost see the wheels turning in the woman's head. "Oh," the woman said, her tone changing completely. "You're in the window seat." "Yes," Maya replied simply, settling back down. She wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but something in the woman's voice made her slightly uncomfortable. The woman looked down at her son, who was now standing in the aisle looking tired and ready to sit down anywhere. "Tommy gets really nervous when he flies," she said, directing her words to Maya. "He's always done much better when he can see outside." "It helps him stay calm." Maya nodded sympathetically. "I understand. Flying can be scary for kids." She genuinely felt for the child, remembering her own childhood anxiety about flying. "I was wondering," the woman continued, and now Maya could see exactly where this was heading, "if you might consider switching seats with him. You could take the middle seat and Tommy could have the window. It would really help him with his anxiety." The request hung in the air between them. Maya felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. She had been in situations like this before, not necessarily on airplanes, but moments where someone assumed she would be willing to give up something she had paid for, planned for, and was looking forward to. "I'm sorry," Maya said as kindly as she could, "but I specifically booked this seat in advance. I have work I need to do during the flight, and I really need the window seat for that." It was true. Maya had learned that she worked best by a window, away from the distractions of people walking up and down the aisle. She had paid extra for this seat specifically because she knew it would give her the environment she needed to prepare for tomorrow's important presentation. The woman's friendly demeanor shifted slightly. "Oh," she said, and there was a hint of surprise in her voice, as if she hadn't expected Maya to say no. "Are you sure? I mean, it's just for a couple of hours, and Tommy really does get anxious." Maya felt the pressure building. Other passengers were now boarding behind them, creating a small traffic jam in the aisle. She could feel eyes on her, and the woman's voice was getting just loud enough that nearby passengers were starting to pay attention to their conversation. "I understand that flying is difficult for your son," Maya said, keeping her voice calm and reasonable. "But I planned ahead and specifically chose this seat for my work. Maybe the flight attendants can help you find another solution?" The woman's expression hardened. "I don't think you understand what it's like to be a mother," she said, her voice rising slightly. "When your child needs something, you do whatever it takes to help them. Surely your work can wait for a few hours." Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks. The implication was clear. Her work, her needs, her advanced planning, none of it mattered as much as what this woman wanted for her child. And the way she said work, as if it were something trivial that Maya was selfishly prioritizing over a child's comfort. "My work is important to me," Maya replied firmly, "and I did plan ahead by booking this specific seat 3 weeks ago." "Well, we paid good money for our tickets too," the woman shot back, her voice now definitely loud enough for other passengers to hear. "I think you're being incredibly selfish. It's just a seat and you're being completely unreasonable about a child's needs." The word selfish hit Maya like a slap. She had been nothing but polite and reasonable, yet somehow she was the villain in this story. She looked at the young boy, Tommy, who seemed more embarrassed by his mother's behavior than anxious about flying. He was tugging on his mother's sleeve, clearly wanting the confrontation to end. "Mom, it's okay," Tommy whispered. "I don't really need the window seat." But his mother ignored him, doubling down on her demands. "No, sweetie, you told me you wanted to see outside. This lady should be more considerate." Maya felt trapped. The aisle was still blocked, preventing other passengers from reaching their seats. The woman was making a scene, painting Maya as the unreasonable one, and the longer this went on, the more uncomfortable the situation became for everyone around them. "Look," the woman continued, now speaking loud enough that passengers several rows away could hear, "I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. We're not asking for much.
Just switch seats so a child can be comfortable."
Any reasonable person would be happy to help." The manipulation was clear. By speaking loudly and framing Maya as unreasonable and uncompassionate, the woman was trying to create social pressure. She was counting on other passengers to side with her, to see Maya as the bad guy who wouldn't help an anxious child. Maya could feel the eyes of other passengers on her. Some looked uncomfortable with the confrontation. Others seemed to be waiting to see how it would play out. She wondered how many of them understood that she had every right to the seat she had booked and paid for. She wondered how many of them would have given in to the pressure by now. "Ma'am," Maya said, keeping her voice steady despite the frustration building inside her, "I understand you want your son to be comfortable, but I have just as much right to my assigned seat as you do to yours. I'm not being unreasonable by wanting to keep the seat I specifically chose and paid for." The woman's face was getting red now, and Maya could see that her polite refusal was only making the situation worse. This was clearly not a person who was used to hearing the word no, especially from someone she expected to comply with her demands. "I can't believe how selfish some people can be," the woman announced to no one in particular, but loud enough for half the plane to hear. "A mother asking for a simple favor to help her child, and you act like I'm asking you to give up your firstborn." Tommy looked mortified, pulling harder on his mother's sleeve. Other passengers were starting to murmur, and Maya could feel the weight of their attention. She realized that this woman wasn't going to give up easily, and the confrontation was only escalating. What had started as a simple request had turned into a public spectacle, with Maya cast as the villain simply for wanting to keep the seat she had rightfully reserved. The commotion in row 14 was now impossible to ignore. Maya could see other passengers turning in their seats, some looking annoyed by the delay, others watching with curious interest. The woman's voice had grown loud enough that even passengers several rows ahead were craning their necks to see what was happening. Maya felt a familiar mix of emotions she had experienced too many times before. The frustration of being painted as unreasonable when she was simply standing up for herself. The embarrassment of being at the center of a public scene she never wanted to be part of. And underneath it all, the quiet anger of being expected to give up something she had every right to keep. "Mom, please," Tommy whispered again, his face now bright red with embarrassment. "Can we just sit down? I really don't care about the window." But his mother was beyond listening to reason, even from her own child. She had committed to this battle and seemed determined to win it. regardless of how uncomfortable she was making everyone around her. "No, Tommy," she said firmly, her voice still pitched loud enough for others to hear. "You shouldn't have to settle for less because someone else is being difficult. We have rights as passengers too." Maya took a deep breath, preparing to respond when she noticed movement in her peripheral vision. James, the flight attendant who had greeted her so warmly when she boarded, was making his way down the aisle. His expression was professional but alert, clearly aware that a situation was developing that needed his attention. "Good evening," James said as he approached, his voice calm and friendly. "I couldn't help but notice there seems to be some confusion here. Is everything all right?" The woman immediately turned to face him, and Maya could see relief wash over her features. Here was someone in authority, someone who could surely see reason and make Maya give up her seat. "Oh, thank goodness," the woman said, her entire demeanor shifting. "Yes, we have a problem. My son Tommy here gets very anxious when he flies, and he really needs the window seat to stay calm. But this woman," she gestured toward Maya with obvious frustration, "is refusing to switch seats with him. I can't understand why she's being so unreasonable about helping a child." James listened patiently, nodding as she spoke. His expression remained neutral, giving nothing away about his thoughts on the situation. When she finished, he turned to Maya with the same professional courtesy. "And you are?" he asked politely. "Maya Johnson," she replied. "This is my assigned seat 14A. I booked it specifically 3 weeks ago." "I see," James said. He looked at both boarding passes, taking his time to examine them carefully. Maya appreciated that he wasn't rushing to judgment, that he was actually looking at the facts of the situation. "So you have seat 14A," he said to Maya, "which you selected and paid for in advance." Then he turned to the woman and Tommy. "And you have seats 14B and 14C, the middle and aisle seats." "Yes," the woman said impatiently, "but surely you can see that a child's comfort should come first. I'm asking for a simple accommodation. Any decent person would be happy to help." Maya bristled at the implication but kept quiet, trusting that James would handle the situation professionally. "I understand your concern for your son's comfort," James said calmly. "Can you tell me, is there a medical reason why Tommy specifically needs the window seat? Any documented anxiety disorder or medical condition that requires this accommodation?" The woman paused, clearly not expecting this question. "Well, no, not officially documented. But he gets nervous and the window helps him feel better. Isn't that enough?" "I appreciate you wanting your son to be comfortable," James replied. "However, our policy is very clear. Passengers are entitled to the seats they have reserved and paid for. We cannot require other passengers to give up their assigned seats unless there is a safety issue or documented medical need." Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, someone in authority was stating the obvious. She had every right to keep her seat. But the woman wasn't giving up that easily. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice rising again. "You're going to side with her over a child? What kind of customer service is this?" "Ma'am, I'm not siding with anyone," James said patiently. "I'm simply following airline policy and basic fairness. Ms. Johnson planned ahead, selected her seat, and paid for it. She has every right to keep it." "This is ridiculous," the woman snapped. "I want to speak to your supervisor. This is the worst customer service I've ever experienced." Maya watched James's face carefully. She could see him processing not just the woman's words, but her tone, her behavior, and the way she was treating both Maya and him. There was something in his expression that suggested he had dealt with situations like this before. "I am happy to have you speak with the lead flight attendant when we're airborne," James said calmly. "But right now we need to prepare for departure, which means everyone needs to be in their assigned seats." "But what about Tommy?" the woman demanded. "What about his anxiety?" James turned to look at Tommy, who had been standing quietly throughout this entire exchange. "How are you feeling, Tommy? Are you okay with your assigned seat?" Tommy looked up at James, then glanced nervously at his mother.
"I'm okay," he said quietly.
"I just want to sit down." "See?" the woman interrupted. "He's clearly upset. He needs the window seat to feel better." But James had been watching Tommy carefully, and Maya could see that he had noticed what she had noticed. Tommy seemed more distressed by his mother's behavior than by any anxiety about flying. "Tommy," James said gently, crouching down to the boy's level, "would you like me to see if there are any other window seats available on the plane? Sometimes we have empty seats that passengers can move to. The boy's face lit up. Really, that would be great. James stood and pulled out his passenger manifest, scanning it quickly. Maya held her breath, hoping there would be another solution that would satisfy everyone. I do have a few options, James said after a moment. There's an empty window seat in row 22 and another in row 8. Would either of those work for you? Row 8 would be perfect, Tommy said eagerly, speaking up for the first time with genuine enthusiasm. But his mother shook her head firmly. No, that won't work. Our seats are together here. I'm not having Tommy sit by himself, and I'm not moving to the back of the plane when we paid for these seats. Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. James had found a perfect solution that would give Tommy the window seat he supposedly needed, while allowing Maya to keep her reserved seat. But the woman was rejecting it, making it clear that this had never really been about Tommy's anxiety at all. Ma'am, James said, his patience clearly being tested. I've offered several solutions. Your son can have a window seat, which addresses your stated concern about his anxiety, but I cannot and will not ask another passenger to give up the seat they paid for when there are other options available. The woman's face was getting redder by the minute. I can't believe this. I've been flying for 20 years and I've never been treated so poorly. You people should be ashamed of yourselves. Maya noticed the phrase "you people" and saw James's jaw tighten slightly. She wondered if he had caught the same undertone she had heard. I'm going to make sure everyone knows about this, the woman continued. The way you're treating paying customers is absolutely disgraceful. And her, she pointed at Maya again, she should be ashamed of herself for being so selfish about a child. Tommy tugged on his mother's sleeve again. Mom, can we please just sit down? I'm tired and I really don't need the window seat. I just want the plane to take off. But his mother was beyond listening to anyone, including her own son. She had made this into a battle of wills, and she was determined not to back down, even when presented with reasonable alternatives that would have given her exactly what she claimed to want. James stood in the aisle for a moment, clearly weighing his options. Maya could see him processing everything that had just happened, the woman's rejection of perfectly reasonable alternatives, her increasingly aggressive tone, and the way she kept pointing at Maya while making her demands. The professional mask he had been wearing was still in place, but Maya could sense his growing frustration with the situation. Ma'am, James said, his voice still controlled but with a slight edge to it. I need to be very clear about something. I have offered you multiple solutions to address your son's needs. There are available window seats on this aircraft that your son can use. However, what I cannot and will not do is force another passenger to give up the seat they legitimately reserved and paid for. The woman's eyes flashed with anger. I can't believe you're taking her side in this. Don't you understand customer service? Don't you know who your paying customers are? Maya felt her stomach clench at the woman's tone. There was something in the way she said paying customers that felt loaded, as if Maya somehow wasn't a legitimate passenger with the same rights as everyone else. Every person on this plane is our customer, James replied firmly. And every customer deserves to be treated with respect and fairness. That includes Ms. Johnson, who has been nothing but polite throughout this entire interaction. Polite? The woman scoffed. She's being completely unreasonable. Any normal person would help a child in need. But I guess some people just don't have the same values the rest of us do. Maya felt the sting of that comment. The implication was crystal clear, even if the woman wasn't saying it directly. She was suggesting that Maya was somehow different, that she didn't share the same values as normal people. James straightened up, and Maya could see that something had shifted in his demeanor. His professional patience was clearly being tested, and the woman's latest comment had crossed a line. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice and take your assigned seats, he said, his tone now carrying unmistakable authority. You are disrupting other passengers and creating a disturbance on this aircraft. A disturbance? The woman's voice rose even higher. I'm trying to get basic customer service for my child. If anyone is causing a disturbance, it's her for being so stubborn about a simple request. Maya could feel the eyes of the entire section on her now. Some passengers looked uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before them. Others seemed annoyed that the departure was being delayed. A few were openly staring, clearly invested in seeing how this drama would play out. The only person causing a disturbance, James said clearly, is you. Ms. Johnson has remained calm and reasonable. She has every right to the seat she paid for, and your continued harassment of her is unacceptable. The word harassment hung in the air like a bomb. Maya saw the woman's face go pale, then flush red again. Harassment? She sputtered. How dare you? I'm a paying customer making a reasonable request. You can't speak to me like that. I can and I will when your behavior warrants it, James replied. And what you're doing right now is not reasonable. You've been offered alternatives that would give your son exactly what you claim he needs, but you've rejected them all. Instead, you're demanding that another passenger give up her rights to accommodate you. Maya was amazed by James's directness. She had expected him to try to find some middle ground, to ask her to help keep the peace by giving in to the woman's demands. Instead, he was clearly standing up for what was right. I want to speak to your supervisor immediately, the woman demanded. Your attitude is completely unacceptable. I'm going to make sure you lose your job over this. You're welcome to file any complaint you wish, James said calmly. But right now we have a plane full of passengers waiting to depart, and I need you to take your assigned seat so we can proceed with our safety demonstration. Tommy, who had been standing quietly beside his mother throughout this entire exchange, finally spoke up. Mom, please, can we just sit down? Everyone is looking at us and I'm embarrassed. Maya's heart went out to the boy. He was clearly mortified by his mother's behavior, and she could see that he was the one suffering most from this situation. But his mother ignored him completely. No, Tommy, don't let them make you settle for less than you deserve. This woman should be ashamed of herself, and so should he, she pointed at James, for not doing his job properly. That's when something interesting happened. James looked directly at Maya, and for the first time since this whole situation began, he smiled. Not a professional customer service smile, but a genuine expression of support and understanding. Ms. Johnson, he said, I want to apologize on behalf of the airline for the treatment you've received today. You have been nothing but gracious and reasonable throughout this entire situation. Maya felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Someone in authority was finally acknowledging that she had done nothing wrong, that she wasn't the villain in this story. Thank you, she said quietly. James turned back to the woman and his expression grew serious again. Ma'am, I'm going to give you one final opportunity to take your assigned seats voluntarily. If you continue to refuse and disrupt this flight, I will have to call security to have you removed from the aircraft. The threat of being removed from the flight seemed to shock the woman into a moment of silence. Maya could see her calculating whether James was serious, whether he really had the authority to kick her off the plane. You wouldn't dare, she said, but there was less certainty in her voice now. Try me, James replied simply. For the first time since this ordeal began, the woman seemed to realize that her tactics weren't working, that her demands, her manipulation, her attempts to paint Maya as the unreasonable one had all backfired spectacularly. This is outrageous, she muttered, but she was finally moving toward her assigned middle seat. I can't believe the way passengers are treated on airlines these days. Tommy quickly scrambled into the aisle seat, clearly relieved that the confrontation was finally ending. As his mother squeezed past Maya to get to the middle seat, she made one final comment, pitched just loud enough for Maya to hear. I hope you're happy, she said bitterly. Making a child suffer just so you can have your precious window seat. Maya didn't respond, but James did. Ma'am, that's enough. One more comment like that and you will be removed from this aircraft. The woman finally fell silent, settling into her middle seat with obvious displeasure. Tommy was already pulling out a book from his backpack, clearly trying to distance himself from his mother's behavior. James turned back to Maya one more time. Again, I apologize for what you've had to endure today. Is there anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable? Maya was about to say no, that she was just grateful the situation was over, when James surprised her with an unexpected offer that would change the entire trajectory of her day. Actually, James said, lowering his voice so only Maya could hear, there is something I can do. We have an available seat in first class. Would you be interested in upgrading? No charge, of course. It's the least we can do after what you've been through. Maya's eyes widened in surprise. She had never flown first class before, always considering it an unnecessary expense for short flights like this one. Are you serious? She asked quietly. Completely serious, James replied with a genuine smile. You handled this situation with incredible grace and patience. You deserve to have a peaceful flight, and honestly, it might be better for everyone if you're not sitting next to—" He glanced toward the woman in 14B, who was now angrily scrolling through her phone. Maya looked around the cabin. Other passengers were watching this interaction with obvious interest, and she could see approval in many of their faces. It seemed that most people had seen through the woman's manipulative behavior and recognized that Maya had done nothing wrong. "I would love that," Maya said gratefully. "Thank you so much." "My pleasure," James replied. "Just gather your things and I'll show you to your new seat." As Maya stood to collect her belongings from the overhead compartment, she noticed Tommy looking up at her with curious eyes. The 8-year-old had been largely silent throughout his mother's dramatic performance, and Maya wondered what he was thinking about the whole situation. "Excuse me," Tommy said softly, causing his mother to look up sharply from her phone. "What is it, sweetie?" the woman asked, her voice immediately shifting to the saccharine tone she used with her son. "I wanted to tell the lady something," Tommy said, looking directly at Maya. Maya paused in gathering her things, touched that the child wanted to speak to her after everything that had happened. "I'm sorry my mom was mean to you," Tommy said simply. "I didn't really need the window seat. I just said I liked looking outside, but I didn't mean she should make you move. You seem really nice, and it wasn't fair." Maya felt her heart clench at the sincerity in the boy's voice. Here was a child showing more maturity and empathy than his adult mother had displayed throughout the entire ordeal. "Thank you, Tommy," Maya said gently. "That means a lot to me. And you know what? I think you're going to do just fine on this flight window seat or not." Tommy smiled shyly and nodded. His mother, meanwhile, looked mortified that her son had essentially apologized for her behavior and contradicted her entire argument about his supposed need for the window seat. "Tommy, you don't need to," the woman started, but her son had already turned back to his book, clearly done with the conversation. Maya finished gathering her belongings, and James gestured for her to follow him toward the front of the plane. As they walked up the aisle, Maya could feel the eyes of other passengers on her, but this time the attention felt different. Instead of the uncomfortable scrutiny she had felt during the confrontation, she sensed support and even admiration from her fellow travelers. An elderly woman in row 8 caught her eye and gave her a small thumbs up. A businessman in row 6 nodded approvingly as she passed. Even some of the other passengers who had boarded after the drama had clearly heard about what happened, and their expressions were sympathetic and supportive. "Right here," James said, stopping at seat 2A. "Your new window seat, and this time, nobody's going to ask you to move." Maya settled into the spacious first-class seat and immediately felt the tension leave her shoulders. The seat was larger and more comfortable than anything she had ever experienced on an airplane. There was actual legroom, a real pillow, and a blanket that looked like it belonged in a nice hotel rather than on a plane. "Can I get you something to drink before we take off?" James asked. "Just water would be great," Maya replied, still somewhat stunned by the turn of events. As James went to get her drink, Maya pulled out her laptop and settled into her new environment. The first-class cabin was quieter, more spacious, and infinitely more peaceful than the scene she had left behind in row 14. She could actually spread out her materials and work comfortably, which was exactly what she had been hoping for when she originally chose her window seat. James returned with her water and a small plate of nuts. "We'll be taking off in just a few minutes," he said. "I want to thank you again for how you handled that situation. In all my years of flying, I've seen a lot of passengers give in to that kind of pressure, even when they were completely in the right." "Why do you think that happens?" Maya asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. James considered the question for a moment. "I think some people bank on others being uncomfortable with conflict. They create a scene, make demands, and count on the fact that most people will give in just to make the drama stop. It's a form of manipulation, really." Maya nodded, thinking about how accurate that assessment was. She had definitely felt the pressure to give in, to take the path of least resistance and avoid the confrontation. "But you didn't give in," James continued. "You stood your ground politely and reasonably, even when she tried to make you look like the bad guy. That takes courage." "It didn't feel like courage at the time," Maya admitted. "It felt awful. I hated being the center of attention like that." "That's exactly why it was courage," James replied. "Doing the right thing when it's difficult, when it's uncomfortable, when people are watching and judging. That's real courage. The captain's voice came over the intercom announcing that they were cleared for takeoff. James excused himself to prepare for departure, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Maya looked out her new window at the Atlanta skyline. She thought about the woman in row 14, probably still fuming about not getting her way. She thought about Tommy, who had shown more maturity than his mother and had the courage to apologize for behavior that wasn't even his fault. But mostly, she thought about what James had said about courage. She had never considered herself particularly brave, but maybe standing up for yourself, refusing to be pushed around or manipulated, was a form of courage she hadn't recognized before. The plane lifted off, and Maya watched the city shrink below her. The view from first class was spectacular, even better than what she would have had from her original window seat. As they climbed higher, she opened her laptop and began working on her presentation, feeling more focused and peaceful than she had in weeks. Her phone, still in airplane mode, showed a text notification from her friend Lisa that she had received before takeoff. "How's the flight going? Getting lots of work done?" Maya smiled and made a mental note to tell Lisa the whole story when she landed. It had certainly been eventful, but in the end it had turned out better than she could have imagined. About an hour into the flight, James stopped by to check on her. "How are you doing? Everything comfortable?" "Perfect," Maya replied. "This was incredibly kind of you. I've never flown first class before." "Well, you certainly earned it today," he said with a smile. "Sometimes doing the right thing comes with unexpected rewards." As Maya settled back into her comfortable seat and returned to her work, she realized that this experience had taught her something important. Standing up for yourself wasn't always easy, and it didn't always make you popular, but it was always worth it. And sometimes, when you least expect it, there are people willing to stand up with you and make sure that doing the right thing is recognized and rewarded. The rest of the flight passed peacefully, with Maya completing all her work and feeling more prepared for her presentation than ever. As they began their descent into Chicago, she looked out the window one more time, grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought her not just to a new city, but to a new understanding of her own strength and worth.